What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and the reviews for Stellar Blade are now out in the open, and they're looking pretty good all things considered. But of course there's a ton of stuff happening and being said that we knew would happen, so obviously I gotta go look into it. Before that, however, there's been some more developments surrounding Warhammer 40K, and its ongoing saga of trying to destroy any goodwill Games Workshop has with fans, and now their own executives are escaping the sinking ship. So let's begin with this article from thatparkplace.com titled, Games Workshop CFO sells 2/3 of her shares amid growing Warhammer boycott. In case you don't know, CFO stands for Chief Financial Officer. They're basically the person in charge of everything when it comes to income and financials within a company. So when this news came about, I just knew things were worse than we thought. The person in question is named Rachel Tung, who has apparently sold around 2/3 of her entire stock investment in Games Workshop as a whole. These shares come to a total of around $850,000 in value, which is a hefty chunk of change, but it has been making others wonder, why is Warhammer CFO cashing out? And isn't it suspicious to be happening when this controversy hit? This of course all started with the female Adeptus Custodes nonsense, and you can find it all over the internet with loyal Warhammer fans proudly stating that they're cancelling their subscriptions in defiance of this complete disregard for the lore. Rachel Tung had announced she was resigning from Games Workshop back in January, but is expected to stay on with the company until the beginning of 2025. But the dump in stock is obviously looking weird considering the situation that the company is in right now. According to the businessdesk.com, which that Park Place used as a source for their article, each of Games Workshop's shares sold went for around $94 a piece, and the company is reeling in the wake of this boycott. If you didn't know, the Warhammer IP saw a massive boost in sales and shares during the pandemic, probably because people obviously had nothing better to do and were stuck at home. So fans stayed home painting their miniatures to pass the time, and this led to a massive boost in Workshop stock value. It did dip in 2022, which is fine, I mean that's how business is sometimes, but it had gone back up in 2023, likely due to the high-profile announcement of Henry Cavill wanting to make the Amazon Prime series. But now of course, due to this Custodes stuff, the stock is lower than it's been in years, and this begs the question of if these executives can see the writing on the wall and are looking to cash out before things get even worse. To put it into perspective for you, the difference between respecting your audience and not, back in 2007, Games Workshop stock market price rose over 2,000% in value. Although, back in 2007, the concept of identity politics and forced inclusion were not really a thing in any industry yet. And in the past 5 years, until the whole female Custodes situation, Games Workshop stock went up another 142.81% increase in shares price too. So pretty much, if you owned shares in Warhammer related things, you were making money for almost 2 decades up until this point. But now of course it's dropping, and what I find very interesting is that when Games Workshop respected their customers and gave them what they wanted, which was a mostly male-dominated hobby aimed at their target demographic that respected the lore, the company was obviously rewarded in mountains of cash. Currently, the entirety of Games Workshop's value sits at around $3 billion. And the amount of money being lost due to this moronic decision proves that when they weren't pandering and forcing inclusion, they were actually being more inclusive and welcoming than they are now. It's sort of like how Disney, where a lot of fans would argue that their inclusion and diversity were better in the 90s and early 2000s than they are now. Because before, when they did it, it felt authentic when you saw diverse characters because they weren't simply defined by skin color. Nowadays, these companies use algorithms and focus test groups to ensure whatever they're making hits every diversity, equity, and inclusion benchmark. The famous example, of course, is Overwatch's Space Diversity tool, which grades a character's viability to being added to the game by setting parameters based on skin color, gender, pronouns, and nationality, to name a few. Basically, the more white and male a character is, the lower that character ranks on Overwatch's algorithm. Which is why it's no surprise a lot of their newer heroes like Venture are diverse looking and of course non-binary, because the algorithm obviously exploded in diverse ecstasy when they entered those prompts. This is all to say that whenever you see much of the diversity in gaming or entertainment, it's almost never genuine whatsoever. And instead it's pretty much only done to appease those algorithms and ensure it increases ESG scores. This may have all been a bit of a tangent, but the point is that Warhammer and their parent company in general were much better at catering to diverse audiences before by simply staying true to the source material. And in actuality, you don't need to see yourself in everything you play or watch in order to enjoy it. I look nothing like Eve from Stellar Blade, yet I can't wait to play it. I also love Barrett Wallace from Final Fantasy VII, even though I'm not a black guy with a machine gun for an arm. And Games Workshop clearly was appealing to audiences far more before, when they weren't busy bending the knee but instead just making cool stuff and not giving a damn what journalists thought about anything. Then there was this other article that I saw thanks to Yellow Flash, who showed it in one of his videos, and I went ahead and read the article, and you can see how the writing was on the wall when it came to these sorts of female custodies changes. The article in question is from wargamer.com, and it's titled, "I'll play Warhammer 40K when LGBT plus folks can feel safe in it." I figure I just read a little of what this article says, and I quote, "It'll take more than one inclusive mission statement to help LGBT plus folks like me feel safe in Warhammer spaces, because 40K's problem with fascism runs deep. For starters, in recent years, Warhammer 40K has been explicitly co-opted as a political tool of the so-called alt-right, a movement with homophobia and transphobia at the core of its ideology. During the 2016 US presidential race, it was difficult to escape seeing images of God Emperor Trump online. A mashup combining the bigoted and authoritarian real-life Donald Trump with the all-powerful sci-fi tyrant that is 40K's God Emperor of mankind. A superhuman being that demands exacting obedience and thousands of human sacrifices daily in order to live." Can I just stop here for a second and say that this image of Trump in the Emperor of Mankind's armor goes hilariously, unbelievably hard. Like, come on dude, this is too funny. Look, even if you hate or love the guy, this image is based as hell and just hilarious. I love this image, I think it's amazing. Now I need a wallpaper of Trump and Biden in power armor suits fighting. Anyway, sorry. Back to the article, and I quote again. "Trump has since been kicked out of real-life political office, of course, but as far as any of us can tell, many of those who happily glorified him using 40K imagery are still here rolling dice. No community is all bad, obviously. I have several friends who were into the Games Workshop tabletop games, and they're wonderful, supportive people. But I've also encountered not-so-great people in every corner of the Warhammer scene. Whether it's seeing them in videos showing off their armies, running into them in Warhammer 40K games online, or inescapably seeing their virulent posts on social media, I am frequently pushing through fascist content while exploring the community. It shouldn't be much of a surprise that bigots in general, and fascists in particular, may be drawn to this universe by the premier Warhammer 40K faction. The incredibly large, handsome, genetically pure uber-mention that are Space Marines, not to mention the brutal authoritarian, overtly xenophobic Imperium of Man which rewards any flavor of dissent with extermination. All of these things are fine concepts for fiction, but well-meaning Games Workshop statements about how bigots aren't welcome in the community won't stop them from slinking in and making the place unsafe for queer people, trans people in particular." End quote. I love this article because it proves how these people with these sorts of mindsets are just deranged individuals who are genuinely insane. And I always laugh whenever I see anyone unironically mention Trump when it comes to video games or anything else. How do you look at Warhammer 40K, which is set thousands of years in the future, and you see the Emperor of Mankind, and your brain immediately goes to Trump? Honestly, man, it feels like Trump derangement syndrome is never going to go away. But it makes me laugh every time. I still love that image of Trump in the power armor, by the way. Good lord, is it based. But this journalist is basically just saying that in order for them and others like him to want to play Warhammer, Games Workshop has to essentially get rid of the Warhammer community first. Which makes absolutely zero sense, but it does fall in line with yet again how deranged and insane these modern day journalists are. Appealing to these crazy people who get their clinical diagnoses off of TikTok is just a really good recipe for destruction. Like, I'm not kidding, by the way, this is what the journalist says in their own article they wrote about what stops queer people apparently from getting into Warhammer. They said, I know of a fair number of queer people who want to get into or more into Games Workshop's miniature wargame hobby, and the obstacles listed are always thus: the price point, which with 40K 10th edition may become less of an issue, having enough space in the home to store what can be a massive army, and the Warhammer community. You can't make this up. I couldn't write something more out of touch culturally yet equally funny if I tried. They actually said, well, me and other queer people would love to play Warhammer if the entire hobby was way cheaper. Completely got rid of the entire pre-existing community, and obviously we could store these armies in our houses somehow. Which we can't, by the way, because we're games journalists and we all have 10 roommates sharing 3 bedrooms, and 7 of those roommates are in polyamorous relationships. So their boyfriends and girlfriends are always crashing in our apartment because they have no job, so naturally we don't have the space to fit a big set of miniatures anywhere. Like, at what point do you just need to realize that a hobby may just not be for you? You want to play Warhammer, but it's too expensive, so you want cheaper alternatives, which dilutes the quality of the product. But you also just hate the entire community and want it to only be people who think like you, but you also don't even have the space for these things anyways. This is like a person in the desert wanting a jet ski. Like, what are you even doing here? Like, this hobby is not for you, clearly. This is like someone saying, I want to get into NASCAR, but only if they drive slower, the cars were cheaper, and everybody would just let me win first place every time I competed. Like, no, that's not how real life works. The delusion is so crazy, they're essentially saying Warhammer needs to become anything but Warhammer for them to join and enjoy. Why do you want to get into a hobby where the imagery is stuff you don't like? The lore goes against all of your made-up, nonsensical political beliefs. The product is too expensive because you have no money and you lack the space. You know what hobby these sorts of people need? They need to turn financial planning into a hobby so they can better manage their money. Maybe hit the gym and stop living with 10 people and try to get out of these liberal-infested hive minds filled to the brim with crazy people. These individuals are insane, dude. They hate you and me, and they want you gone from every space to accommodate to their moronic beliefs. And maybe stop making your sexual preferences your entire identity and actually stop being NPCs for once in your lives. The only thing stopping you from playing Warhammer is your own moronic mindset. It is not the fandom that has cultivated and supported the hobby that is the issue. It only became an issue when idiots wanted everything to bend to their ideology. And if these sorts of like-minded individuals have infiltrated the Amazon Prime Warhammer show, it's cooked, dude. And it'll only be Warhammer in name. But now, let's talk about Stellar Blade, which is coming out soon. As of the making of this video, it's not out yet. The game has reviewed quite well, landing on 83 on Metacritic, which is great for a game developer who's making their first AAA console game like this. Especially in Korea, by the way, which has a predominantly free-to-play mobile-centric mantra to making games. Apparently, according to Stellar Blade's CEO, them even proposing the game be made in the first place was seen as insane by many other Korean devs around them because it wasn't a mobile game and cost actual money to get into. I'm glad it's reviewing well and pre-orders are through the roof, but of course this won't stop game journals from being morons like this article from Games Radar titled, Stellar Blade puts even some incredibly stupid sexy outfits that hurt the game's story. But despite the forced sex appeal, I actually love her detailed design. According to this journalist, they didn't care for asexuality because they are, as they say themselves, there's been a lot of deserved talk about the male gaze and the part it played in how Eve looks. As someone with a lot of experience on learning that same male gaze, I have an editor's scaring moment of thoughts on how Stellar Blade fails Eve, why I actually like her core design, and why I expect plenty of people to feel a similarly neutral way once everyone can actually play this game. To explain all this, I am forced to once again break out my greatest superpower, asexuality. So, this journalist is apparently asexual, which means they're someone who is not attracted to anyone, and they have no desire to ever engage in any sort of romantic contact with anyone. They basically have no desires when it comes to physical stuff with human beings, which I find very weird, but I guess some people are really out here having the same preferences as literal plants in a field. But none of this surprises me, considering this is modern games journalism. But it's also weird that this writer said they have a lot of experience unlearning that same male gaze. So this journalist, who doesn't care for Eve's sexual appeal, admits at some point in their life they had male gaze but forced themselves to no longer have it. I don't know, man. This sounds like some guy who was either in some traumatic relationship where the part of their brain broke that connects them to people, or they've renounced everything and want to live as a monk for whatever reason. Case in point, the person making this article is pretty much the last person Games Radar should have playing a game like Stellar Blade or speaking on this topic whatsoever. The journo says they like Eve's eyelashes, pores in their skin, and the slight belly fat on their stomach, which, careful there, buddy. For someone who's asexual, you're being pretty anti-asexual right now, commenting on a woman's belly fat? In 2024 on a games journalist article, you're on thin ice, buddy. But their main complaint is that Eve's outfits don't make sense within the confines of the stories that are being told. But my answer to that is the game is made by based Korean developers, and even outside of Korea, you have many Japanese games that offer fan service within their games in order to appease to those fans. The Tales of games, for example, are famous for having tons of customization that you can put on your characters. Even if you can put Elfin from Tales of Arise in a top hat with bunny ears, yeah, it might look out of place, but it's up to the player if they want to do that. The point of the outfits is not immersion breaking per se, the point is to allow players to express their individuality and style through which outfits they choose. The same way how in a Dark Souls or Elden Ring, you can put whatever the hell you want on your characters too. The journo also uses Aphrodite from Hades 2 again as an example, which I can't even show fully on screen because the design is not safe for work, but here's what they said about it. There's nothing inherently wrong with liking these outfits or with games having this material in it. I just wish the developers had gone all in and made more sexy stuff that actually looks good on Eve, something she would feasibly wear. Hades 2's Aphrodite wears a few strands of her own hair and nothing else, but is less vulgar than Eve in a bikini that's clearly not right for her. I don't want less or censored smut, I want thoughtful smut. Sexual themes don't have to be taboo and shouldn't be, but they don't have to be dumb either. This just proves again that these journos just hate stuff that isn't Western, because like I said previously in a video, if Eve had an outfit like Aphrodite, with pink hair covering her privates and a thong on just like she has, they would absolutely lose their minds and say it's sexist and tasteless. But the real reason they like Aphrodite is because the face of that design is clearly a trans woman, and that's why it's okay. Whereas Eve is clearly a woman and they don't like that. It's simply because they can't relate to Eve because she's not gender ambiguous and vaguely not either man or woman enough for them. This journal also says it becomes a matter of agency. Eve herself doesn't show off her body, the camera lingers on it. With a habit of overtly putting her butt front and center, Eve would never choose to wear the game's more revealing getups. The bunny girl, the bikini, the other bunny girl, the other bikini. Some outfits look great from the front, but then you spin the camera around and find a skirt or leotard hiked so far up Eve's ass that you'd need pliers to get it out. There is none of Eve in this, she could only be forced to wear these outfits by the player. I avoided them not just because I thought they looked stupid, but because they felt wrong and out of place in an immersion-breaking kind of way. My god, man, I knew these sorts of articles would show up inevitably, but they always seem to miss the point somehow too. No video game character that allows for customization in a sense has a sense of self-agency. They're avatars in a video game. Even your ugly mongoloid Last of Us protagonists don't have agency because no matter what, they're controlled by the player regardless. These journos are attacking Stellar Blade's outfits because they somehow think it will harm women, which they won't, by the way. They also said Eve's starting skin-tight outfit makes no sense or fits the character. Yet we can clearly see in-game that the outfit can use some sort of cloaking technology to automatically create outfits that impose themselves over the stealth suit. Of course, Stellar Blade isn't out yet, so I can't say if I'm right or not, but the way I looked at Eve's outfit and the other ones that she can wear is they are less so Barbie doll outfits, and they are simply disguises that Eve can wear in order to blend into her environment. She comes down from space in the beginning in a pod and then emerges onto a battlefield. In a lot of ways, Eve's outfit seems to act like Solid Snake's in Metal Gear Solid 4 somewhat. It can adapt to the environment around it like a chameleon. And if I was a super soldier that was attempting to blend in with the populace, having a stealth suit that has the technology to use crazy 3D light bending technology to create any outfit I want so I can move around in the world I'm investigating is dope as hell. In a lot of ways, I just see Eve as always wearing that stealth suit all the time, and any other suit she wears is just some disguise that her base suit projects. Like, if she needed to get into a club or something, she could project a dress on. Or if she was in a dark forest, she could project something to blend in with. You get the idea. Obviously, I could be wrong. Again, it's not out yet, but that's how I interpreted Eve's outfit when I played the demo. She's basically just wearing a super advanced version of Solid Snake's stealth suit, but it can create other outfits on a whim around it like Snake does camouflage when he touches certain surfaces. You ask me, that's dope as hell, and clearly regardless of what these journos say, the game is going to sell well, and even most of these reviewers who attempted to mental gymnastics around Stellar Blade's sexualization still couldn't score it lower than an 80 in most places. So it looks like the reign of Stellar Blade is upon us, and I'm sure we'll see more insufferable articles and takes in the coming week or so. But Eve right now is the woke journalist's new version of Trump in that power armor. It's going to live rent-free in their heads for years to come. And they hate that they can't stop the based wave of fan love that is going to come for Stellar Blade. And as for Warhammer, their loss in revenue, their CFO leaving, and that other person demanding the community be altered, it's never going to work. And if anything, Games Workshop will revert these changes soon, or they'll just keep losing money. It's really up to them. As always, thank you for watching, subscribe, like, and share the video, and thanks to my patrons as always too. Have a wonderful day, stay based, and I'll see you in the next one.